Good morning. And it is a good morning. Any morning we are here together is a good morning. Welcome to the in-person and live Zoom worship service of the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside. Our opening hymn this morning is number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but please, only with a mask on. I know there's been some changes from the government, but until our board tells us differently, I ask that you continue to mask when you sing. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come, 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 whoever you are, condemned, worshipper, whoever you're leaving, ours is no worshipper, lover is leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, whoever you are, condemned, worshipper, whoever you're leaving, ours is no caravan, lover is leaving. Come yet again, come.
Thank you for joining us here in person, and thank you for joining us remotely by Zoom, where we will continue live streaming and posting these services on our YouTube channel for our virtual attendees. I'm Nick Williams, a member of the worship committee, and I will be your worship associate today. Other members of the worship committee you will hear from include Alec Peck, helping to sing our hymns, and Tinka Friend, who will be reading our ceremony. I thank Adam sitting down front for his technical support, and Kate hiding in the back corner, who runs our sound system so eloquently. We welcome you to join us this morning with an open mind and an open heart, and with muted electronic devices. We all come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. We hope you will find ideas that resonate with you and inspire you to live authentically in your spiritual, local, and world communities. Although our doors are open, the pandemic is not over. So while we are in the sanctuary, please keep your masks on while singing or chanting, and let us all take personal responsibility to keep both ourselves and each other safe. Before we move into the service, there are a few announcements we would like to share. We'll mention several websites, email addresses, and phone numbers. At the end of the service, we will leave a slide up with all this information, and it's available to you on our website. The monthly UUCR newsletter comes out the first of every month by email and per request. by postal mail. If you have something newsworthy or that you would like to contribute, email uuchurchofriverside.calendar@gmail.com or call the church office at 951-686-6515. If you would like to be added to our mailing list, please contact the church office. Our first Sunday luncheon will be served after the service. Today's theme is a baked potato bar. Contributions are appreciated and will be donated to the church fund. Our annual pledge drive for the 2023 through 2024 fiscal year will begin with lunch on Sunday, March 12th from 11:30 to 1:30. All members and friends are invited. Oh, thank you. We set up a signal and I forgot what it meant. Don't forget that there's the time change next weekend. So that's spring forward. So 1 hour. So if you don't change your clock, you'll get here way early. Way late? Okay. Well, that's why they write this stuff down for me. Our dinner series will continue on March 18th at 1 p.m. with a St. Patrick's Day luncheon. Please note that the time is earlier than in the past. Tickets are on sale now and are pre-sale only. The Concerned UUs of Riverside, CUUR, the community outreach arm of the Social and Environmental Justice Committee, will be meeting in the annex at 11:30. You can find more information on the website under Social and Environmental Justice. Church Council meets on the second Friday of the month in the annex. The next meeting will be at 4 p.m. on March 10th. Now, I invite you to sit back, take a slow, deep breath as we move into our worship hour. You are welcome to read with me the mission statement of our church. Our mission is to foster a diverse religious community that celebrates life, affirms the individual, encourages spiritual growth and open thought, and works to advance social justice and environmental sustainability. Today's sermon was written by Reverend Bruce Clear. The Reverend Dr. Bruce Clark Clear was ordained in 1983, earning a doctorate from the University of Chicago's School of Theology. In 1993, after serving in Vancouver, Washington, and Portland, he returned to his roots in Indiana, becoming the pastor of All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. Reverend Clear's work as a theologian and minister was defined by an abiding passion for social justice as the foundation of church community. As pastor in each of his churches, he became an active member of the local council of churches and an outspoken community advocate for progressive and humanitarian causes. The Theist in Me. Today's sermon reading, The Theist in Me, is the second in a series of explorations of 3 different belief systems found within UU churches, written by Reverend Bruce Clear. Unitarian Universalist Reverend Clear says, "There is a theist in me as well as a humanist. The God of this theism, though, is a natural, not a supernatural God. It is not the God of children's stories, nor is it the God of traditional lore. This God is not easy to describe or explain, so it deserves having a whole sermon devoted to it. Do you have a theist in you? Join us today as we explore a sense of God inside us. We have two lightings of sacred flames. The first is the occupied indigenous peoples remembrance candle. The second is the lighting of our own chalice, the symbol of our faith. We walk upon traditional territories of diverse and sovereign peoples, the original people of this land, who continue to cry out for justice and self-determination. This spot we occupy was first the sacred space of several groups of indigenous peoples, including the Cahuilla, the Cupena, and the Serrano. We, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside, light this sacred flame as the stewards of the sacred and holy place. We are blessed with the space and opportunity to strive to live out our common principles, to bring justice, equality, and compassion into our daily lives, to resist all that threaten the earth and her people, and to be part of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Let these thoughts carry us forth as we journey and worship together. Today's reading for the chalice lighting is an adaptation of a prayer by Hildegard of Bingen. Fire of the Spirit, life of the lives of creatures, spiral of sanctity, bonds of all natures, glow of charity, lights of clarity, taste of sweetness to the fallen, be with us and hear us. Composer of all things, join in the glory, strong honor, and be with us and hear us. We have a tradition here at UUCR to welcome those who are visitors or perhaps returning after some time away. We know it can be uncomfortable to stand up and speak in front of others, and so I will now ask for a volunteer from someone who has been here a while to tell us your name and how you found out about our church. We ask you to step close to the mic, speak into it directly and clearly so everyone can hear. However, be aware that you will be visible on our Zoom camera and in the recording of this service, which is posted online. Do we have any church members who would like to volunteer? Anyone? All right, Bill. Please step forward to the mic and tell us your name, how long you've been here, and how you found out about our church.
My name is Bill Rowe. I found out we were members of the Long Beach Church. We moved out here in 91. It wasn't until 2004 that we were sitting around the sun deck talking, and 4 or 5 of us come to find out there was another Unitarian around the table. And I says, "Where's our Unitarian church?" And he says, "In Riverside, right next to the library." That's when next door used to be a library. And that's how I found out about it.
Thank you. That's how it's done. If you are new here, a visitor, or an old friend, please raise your hand to stand and come up to the mic in front of the pulpit. Please. Name, step close to the mic.
Yellow. Ray Ochoa, and I've been a follower of the Unitarian principles and what they stand for totally resonates with me. Never been here and always wanted to come. So here I am.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We're glad you're here. Is there anyone online who would like to introduce themselves? No one? Okay. For our new guests, please join us for socializing and coffee hour after the service. We, of course, will also be having our first Sunday luncheon. We'd love to chat with you out in the parish hall, where you can also find our visitors book. Please leave your name before you leave so that we know you were here, and leave your contact information if you want to know about upcoming events. For those online, the best way to get added to the mailing list is to email the church office at admin@uuchurchofriverside.org. And now, our joys and concerns. It's said that shared joy is a double joy. Shared sorrow is half sorrow. On the first Sunday of each month, we share the joys and concerns that we have received from you, which you have collected throughout the month. First, I'm going to read the joys and concerns which were given to us. A joy. Thankful for the beautiful snow we experienced last weekend. Concern. For those who live in the mountains and are experiencing difficulty getting around. Joy for the warm rays of sunshine after the storm. Joy and gratitude for Walt Russell's generous donation of a laptop for the pulpit. Joy and gratitude for the willing volunteers and friends who keep the church going. Concern. Whelan Neo is currently waiting for surgery. We hope she will recover soon and will be back and able to sing with us once again. Concern for John Longfield's recovery after his hip surgery. Is there anyone here in the sanctuary who would like to come speak their joy or concern? Please raise your hand and we will invite you to speak here at the microphone. While you're gathering your courage, I'll share with you I have started physical therapy and find myself already getting around better after my fall a couple months ago. So it's great to be able to get up here. Anyone else? Alec, please step forward. I mentioned Alec earlier as he sings for us.
Yes, and so I guess my first sorrow is that I missed the first hymn this morning already, but I'll sing in a moment. But there have been a couple of sorrows that have actually been weighing on me for the last month that I didn't get a chance to mention in February, and so I would like to share them with you. Even though, so I guess I'm also sorry that I have mostly sorrows to share, but. For one, my grandfather has been in deteriorating mental health for a while over the last few years, but recently there was an incident which led him to being checked into the hospital for his well-being, and according to my mom, his daughter, he was almost unrecognizable, looking essentially like a homeless person, even though he's got plenty of money to take care of himself. He just, at one point, I might have said that he chooses not to, but now at this point, I think that he's lost the mental capacity to make that choice. And in the last, over the last month, that chain of events has led him to being shipped out of his apartment that he's lived in for many, many decades to an assisted care home in Illinois. essentially, it's hard to say against his will, because at this point, it's hard to tell how much he really understands his own situation right now. But he cannot take care of himself, and he's now fallen a few times. And but buried in there, I do have a joy that since he's been moved out of his apartment in New York, that means that there's a good chance that I will see him in person before he dies, which will be nice. One other sorrow that I have is that I have been attending a UU summer camp since I was a little child, and because of financial difficulties, they suddenly had to cancel the camp this year, and it's even been suggested that maybe it will not be, we will not have a new place to host it, and so it might need to be discontinued. And this is a camp that's been going on for, I think, over 50 years total. And it has moved a couple times, but it was one of the most impactful experiences of my childhood. And it's a UU summer camp. And it would be such a shame for that to be lost. And it feels like I've lost an old friend, like an old friend has died, hearing that this summer camp will no longer be happening. And it has been very difficult for me to handle it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. And I know many of us are reaching an age where we're faced with the same dilemma with either our parents or have in the past, and may be facing the same kind of situation in the future. Is there anyone else who'd like to share? We have one online. Evelyn.
Hello, I don't know if you guys can hear me. But I'd like to share a joy in that it's kind of vague, but I'm at a point in my life where I'm learning to be happy on my own and not necessarily depend on other people to be happy. And that's been a great joy for me, that I can learn to bring joy to my own life. And a sorrow is that me and someone else are not on the same page about what we are, in quotes, but we're working through that. So yep, that's my joy and my sorrow.
Thank you. Thank you. Walt.
Yesterday, I fled Walgreens with my prescriptions and went to a competitor because they're refusing to supply RU46 into 4 states that currently are illegal for it. And I left a couple of notes hoping that it will uplink, and someone, because such places respond to lack of money, so hopefully they'll reconsider. And also that Rite Aid was thinking about following them. Hopefully Rite Aid will think twice. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we any others? Bill?
I tend to come up here a lot for first responders. Sounds like I need to broaden things out a little bit. My joy and my concern is also for the therapists in the world, the people who are dealing with chronic problems that are not as dramatic as a blizzard or a house falling on you, but the people who still put the fires out, clean up the ashes, help us to look at ourselves, and help us to look at ourselves and say, I've got something to work with here. So for them as well. So all those little voices on YouTube, even if I'm looking at something that I'm probably not going to do, something that reminds me of what it means to be a human being, not slowly being constricted, but growing into being more of a human than maybe I have been. And it's never too late.
Thank you, Bill. Tinka, did you want to share about the training? No? Okay. Bonnie.
This past week, my brother-in-law, after a long, slow, protracted illness, died. He died of the complications of diabetes. I have lost so many friends to that disease. If you or someone you know has diabetes, please take care of it. It devastates your family.
Thank you, Bonnie. Prayers and thoughts are with you in this time of grief. Thank you for sharing.
I will quickly. A joy is that Nick and I went to a training that was offered by the Congregational Church across the street. It was put on by the county mental health office. Wonderful training. It was basically the reason why it was established, or the reason why we formed and joined over there was basically how to handle the mentally ill, homeless that we encounter consistently, you know, that come into the church and at times be disruptive or whatever. It was a long training. It went from 8 in the morning till 6 at night. We got a certificate. But anyway, I think it was very meaningful. It was, we learned a lot. And so we will be sharing what we learned to the church. And a concern that I have is I love this country. I love what this country stands for. I love what the potential that this country has. But I am so sad and so frightened for the women in this country right now. I feel like we are going back 200 years, and bit by bit by bit, I feel like we are, I know it's going to sound dramatic. I feel like we are, the way they do cattle going to slaughter, how you're here and then you get narrowed and narrowed and narrowed until there's just one chute that you go through, and that's like it. You're not sure what, what's waiting for you at the end of that chute. And so my prayers, one, for the women in this country, and secondly, for the decision makers in this country, that they let love come into their heart, that they think about the consequences of their decisions, from our elected officials to the appointed judges, and the businesses, to all of it. I want their minds and their hearts to be open with love.
Thank you. We place a stone in our water chalice to represent the joys and concerns we have shared with our church community, and in recognition of those we hold close and have not shared. May we remember those who have spoken, those who have named, and those we hold in silence in our hearts. Hymn number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but please only with a mask on. Please stand in body or spirit, singing 1170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People.
We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
I lost my screen, Adam. I'm going to watch you do this. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I won't embarrass myself like that again. Sharing our stewardship. This portion of our service is to support our beloved historical church. This can be accomplished several ways. In addition to the weekly collection, you may send your checks to the church address, which is shown here. You may contribute by PayPal using the QR code, which is shown here, as well as on the church website and in the newsletter. Stater Brothers Market gives our church a rebate on Stater grocery cards, which we will have in church each Sunday. You get the full value, and the church also receives a percentage for free. Please see Diner Row to purchase the gift cards. Please donate as the Spirit moves you by whatever method works best for you. Thank you for your generosity. And to those who give of their time and their talent, thank you for your generous care and attention. Will our ushers now please come forward to receive the collection? Our next hymn is number 402, From You I Receive, from the Gray Hymnal. Number 402. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but please only with a mask on. Please stand in body and spirit and join us in singing hymn 402, From You I Receive.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
Please be seated. Our meditation today is by Barbara Hamilton Holway. We gather here as individual people, young and old, male and female, temporarily able and disabled, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and straight people, all the colors of the human race, theist, atheist, agnostic, Christian, Buddhist, feminist, humanist. We gather here as a community of people who are more than categories. We gather here, each ministering to the other, meeting one another's strength, encouraging wholeness. We give thanks for this extraordinary blessing, the gathering together of separate, unique individuals as one whole, one body, our church. Here may your minds stretch, our hearts open, our spirits deepen. Here may we acknowledge our brokenness and be ever stirred by love's infinite possibilities. Come, let us worship. Now let us pause for a moment of silence. Now I would like to introduce Tinka Friend reading the sermon, The Theist in Me, by Reverend Bruce Clear.
So as you heard earlier, I am a member of the worship committee, and I just want to be clear, I did not write this. Not because I don't want to be associated with it. I wish I had written this. But the sermon you will be hearing this morning was taken from the worship web and found on the website of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It is second in a series of 3 sermons by Reverend Bruce Clear. The series focuses on different beliefs of 3 types of people who find a religious home within Unitarian Universalism: a humanist, a theist, and a Christian. You may or may not find parts of yourself in this series. So remember, these are the words of Bruce Clear, not mine. Please note that the sermon does not necessarily reflect the views of the reader. However, I will tell you that I found a lot of myself in this sermon. This was a very comfortable sermon for me to read. I'm wondering, as we said, this is a first, each month we read one, and then this is the second one, and then we'll be reading the third. So could you, just from, I'm interested, could you raise your hand if you were able to hear the first of the series that we did last month? That was on the humanist in me. Now I'm going to ask you, those who heard it, did you find any of it within yourself? Could you relate to any of what that sermon was? Could you raise your hand if you related? I did too. And then today you will hear the theist in me. And then on the first Sunday of next month, I will deliver the third and last sermon of the series, the Christian in me. And now for Reverend Clear's words. You may have noticed that I do not completely attach myself to one label. I do not speak, as I've heard other ministers do, under the title of, why am I a humanist? Or why am I a theist? Or why am I a Christian? The fact is that Unitarian Universalism in general, and this speaker in particular, is quite pliable and adaptable. A single label rarely captures the essence. Our religion could and has been called a fuzzy religion, for it does not demand precise categories or labels. Last month, I spoke of the humanist in me, and in doing so, I spoke of my appreciation for and my commitment to that tradition which honors reason as the arbiter of belief. Reason is the keystone of the humanist view, and it warrants my solid intellectual and religious respect and commitment. In honoring reason, humanism rejects supernaturalism. This is the part of the humanism that is in me. Rejecting the supernatural, however, does not necessarily entail rejecting the sense of the sacred, or the sense of the holy, or for that matter, the sense of the divine. There is a theist in me, as well as a humanist. The God of this theism, though, is a natural, not a supernatural God. It is not the God of children's stories, nor is it the God of traditional lore. This God is not easy to describe or to explain, and so it deserves having a whole sermon devoted to it. The idea of God arose from vague sources in the misty human past. Many psychologists suggest that the idea of God arose from our mental projections. According to Freud, for example, we began to believe in a God because even as we grow older, we crave the protective care of a parent. And so we exalt the memory of our own parents, or perhaps the parents we wish we had. And we call that all-powerful idea God. Others say the idea arose out of our ignorance of how the world works. Since our ancestors could not adequately explain the weather or the seasons or the sun or the moon, they invented the idea of an all-powerful, supernatural, conscious being who could control these mysteries that were beyond our understanding. Whatever the historical source of the idea of God, we know that the idea is pervasive in the human race. There has probably been more thought and writing throughout history on this subject than on any other single idea. In the Great Books series, which contains the writings of such great figures as Homer, Aristotle, Shakespeare, Tolstoy, and Darwin, the two thickest volumes are the indices, which give a subject reference to the ideas contained in the great books. The indices are broken down into what it calls great ideas, such as democracy, truth, and love. And in the chapter referencing the great book writings on the subject of God, one finds the following claim. In sheer quantity of references, as well as in variety, this chapter on God is the largest chapter. The reason is obvious. More consequences for thought and action followed from the affirmation or denial of God than from answering any other basic question. According to this, then, the idea of God is probably the most popular idea in the great writings of Western civilization. This fact has a particular sting to it when one realizes that the next half hour or so will be devoted to thoughts on this subject from a humble minister from Indiana. I don't believe that the existence of God, or for that matter, any claim about God, can be proven. The question, does God exist, is a non sequitur. It has no meaning. The question implies that we can talk about God in the same way we talk about cows or leprechauns or triangles. I have at times mentioned the ancient Hebrew tradition in which the name of God is unutterable. In Hebrew scriptures, the name for God is rendered by the initials YHWH, and which today we usually pronounce Yahweh. And the word Yahweh, the linguists tell us, means it causes to be, or it causes existence. To say that God exists is to confuse God, the source of existence, with the things that exist themselves. Yeah, I do not believe that God exists. I do not believe in the existence of a being to which I ascribe the name God. And yet, at the same time, I do believe in God. I believe in a unifying force of the universe to which I may relate and on which I can rely. I do not believe that God exists, yet I believe in God. I expect the juxtaposition of these two sentences to be confusing for you. I hope so, because it's confusing for me too. But it reinforces my conviction that talking about God tends to raise more confusion than clarity. And that's why I talk about God so very rarely in public. This morning, I will talk about God. And I wish to share with you some of the thinking I have done recently about that concept. And I begin with a humble disclaimer. I have nothing reliable to say about God. In fact, no one has anything certain or reliable to say about this subject. It is too often the case that those who speak about God presume to speak for God, on behalf of God. They tell us about what God approves and disapproves. They tell us what pleases God, what angers God, and what God wants us to do. In most talk about God, the speaker's opinions are presented as God's opinions, and therefore the speaker doesn't need to claim responsibility for his or her own views. They are, it is alleged, from God. As for me, I feel more comfortable speaking my own opinions and not burdening God with the blame or the credit for what I say. There is nothing reliable or certain that can be said on the subject of God. But there is, I suggest, much that can be said that is interesting, and probably a few things that can be said that are useful. While we cannot speak about what God is like, we can at least speak about our human experiences of the divine. Such experiences, found continuously through human history, are, I think, often interesting and perhaps occasionally useful. It is in that spirit that I approach the subject this morning. My approach is like that of T.S. Eliot, that great secular poet who spent so much of his life in search of God. Eliot spoke about the human experience of the divine as the point of intersection between the timeless with time. Here's what he wrote in part. To apprehend the point of intersection of the timeless with time is an occupation for the saint. There are only hints and guesses. Hints followed by guesses. And the rest is prayer, observance, discipline, thought, and action. The hint, half guessed, the gift, half understood, is incarnation. Hints and guesses, says Eliot. For me, that is all we can say about the divine. We begin with our own experience. We learn from the experiences of others. And what we gain in understanding the divine, which is ineffable, beyond the human world of knowledge, is really merely hints and guesses. So this morning I will share with you some of my hints and guesses about God. So what is God? What is the theist in me? I cannot answer with any reliability or certain any more than the ancient Hebrews could, but I can offer, in the words of Eliot, some hints and guesses. These hints and guesses arise of both common and uncommon experiences. Hint number one. There is something that urges people to love and care for one another. Rabbi Harold Kirshner, who has written movingly about the meaning of suffering, wrote the following about God. When people ask me, where is God? I tell them I would rather rephrase the question to read, when is God? Asking where implies that God is an object located in a specific place. And if we could just find that right place, we would find God. Asking when is God gives us the idea that God can be anywhere if the right things are happening. When people are loving, brave, truthful, charitable, God is present. God is not in the place, but in the moment. Martin Buber, when asked, where is God found, would reply that when people treat each other truly in a truly human fashion, God fills the empty space between them, like an electric arc between poles. God is not so much in either person as in the relationship that connects one to the other. The love and care that is expressed between and among human beings is, for me, an expression of the divine and the divinity that lies between the logic and the order of the universe. This, I think, is the meaning of the following line written by E.E. Cummings. Love is a deeper season than reason. Love is a deeper season than reason. So the first hint about God is that there is something that urges people to love and care for one another. Hint number 2, life is meaningful. At least this is my experience of life. There is no particular reason why life should be meaningful. You're born, you live, you die. And yet, somehow in that simple formula, people have been able to fill their years with existence with meaningful acts and contribute to the greater enjoyment of love and life by all. The great psychologist Rob May died back in 1994, and I suppose I subscribe to his definition of religion, that religion is the assumption that life has meaning. One's religious attitude is to be found at that point where he or she has a conviction that there are values in human existence worth living and dying for. So if you assume that life carries meaning, you are, by this definition, religious. Where does this meaning come from? I suppose we create it ourselves mostly, or we inherit it from others to some extent. But it is not absurd to suggest that meaning has as its source what everything else has as its source. I remember in my studying of Alfred North Whitehead's philosophy, being perplexed by the fact that he talked about God at all. Whitehead offers a fairly complex but complete system. His metaphysics offer to explain why things are the way they are in fully natural, not supernatural ways. Why then did he talk about God? I poured through dozens of books about Whitehead, searching for an answer until I finally found one. It was only a sentence or two, but it suggested a reason. Whitehead needed God, the author said, to explain novelty in the world. Novelty. That something new happens, that something unexpected happens, such as genetic mutation, for example. The world can go on tomorrow pretty much as it did today, but somehow something tomorrow will be different. And another philosopher, the Unitarian Henry Nelson Veman, called it creativity. Novelty or creativity, whatever it is, there is something that allows us to face life with fresh vigor, with excitement, and with meaning. Life is meaningful, or at least it can be. There's no reason why life should be meaningful, but for many people it is. Meaning arises from the novelty and creation of the human imagination. Novelty and creation being normal components of nature itself. From that creativity, we can create meaning. The discovery of meaning for many of us is a hint at what Eliot called the intersection of the timeless with the time. Hint number 3. It seems increasingly clear that science is moving towards a theory of cosmic unity and interrelatedness. Well, it used to be the case that science tried to study nature by isolating it into its discrete different parts. Today, science is increasingly finding that nothing can be understood in isolation from the rest of the world. Every atom in the universe is related to every other atom. Physicist David Bohm has written about the unity of the cosmos and suggests a theory that the whole of the universe is somehow greater than the sum of its parts. The universe is a living system, just as on a smaller scale, we are living systems. It is easy to consider the human being as being greater than the sum of its parts. We are only now beginning to understand the cosmos as a living system, too. As parents watching our children grow, we are fascinated by the development of their individual personhoods. They have their own personalities, their own memories, their own private thoughts. We recognize in our children their own consciousness and emotions. Each one, we come to conclude, is far greater than just the sum of his or her parts. Each one is, in fact, a person. So too, Bohm would say, the universe seems to be more than the sum of its parts. Beyond the vast sea of energy that fills the void between the planets and the stars, there seems to be a creative force, what he calls holomovement, that gives the universe a unifying character, not unlike the unifying character of someone's personality. The universe is more than the sum of its parts, and in the universe that can be observed, as Eliot so poetically noted, the intersection of the timeless with the time. Hint number 4. I am amazed at the human capacity to overcome tragedy and pain. For example, I stand in admiration of any alcoholic who is able to control that disease. I am impressed by those who have suffered the deep pain of loss and can still live with hope. Where do they find the strength? There is nothing supernatural about it, not at all. It is altogether natural, but it is also sacred. Again, I will let Harold Kirshner speak. I believe in miracles, but I believe only in big miracles, not little ones. Things like parting the Red Sea or making the sun stand still are not miracles for me. Those are special effects. Cecil B. DeMille or Steven Spielberg can do it as easily. Authentic miracles, the big miracles, happen when weak people transform and become strong, when timid people show courage, when selfish people turn generous. I can believe in God because someone else has proven it to me philosophically. I can believe in God not because someone else has proven it to me philosophically, but because I so often see ordinary people become capable of the most extraordinary accomplishments. Hint number 5. There is something that connects me to the rest of the universe. At least that's how I feel. There's an underlying logic and a penetrating power that oversees the pattern of the planets, the seasons of the years, and the flux of my own life. Let me call it the reason or rationality of the universe. The 19th century Romantics wrote of reason, always with a capital R, as the divine source that influenced all things. Perhaps I belong in the 19th century, but that image makes some sense to me. Or perhaps I belong way back in the 1st century, for the early Christians also used the same metaphor when speaking of logos as a word for God. Logos means reason or logic of the universe. an inherent orderliness or harmony that all things honor, that allows things to make sense. There is a dusty old book I found on my shelf, published over a century ago, that seems to connect with the modern physicist's view of the cosmic unity. The book is titled The Idea of God, and it was written by John Fiske, a philosophy professor at Harvard. This book was written in the 1880s, not long after Darwin's theories had challenged some of the traditional religious doctrines. Fiske felt himself to be a philosopher of evolution. Darwin, he felt, had revolutionized scientific knowledge, and it was his task to examine the philosophical implications of Darwinism. And it was this effort that produced the book. In it, Fiske looked at the religious implications of Darwinism. What resulted is, in fact, a description of the universe that could have been written by 20th century physicists like Bohm. Fiske writes, "If the study of physics has taught us anything, it is that nowhere in nature is inertness to be found. All is quivering with energy." For Fiske, this persistent energy is called, no kidding, the force. One wonders if Han Solo had read Fiske. It is, he says, the animating principle of the universe. But elsewhere, he refers to it as power, the infinite and eternal power. And I am part of that power, just as you are part of that power. There is something that connects us to the rest of the universe. Call it reason or rationality, call it logos or logic, call it nature or God. Whatever it is, hints at what Eliot described as the intersection of the timeless with the time. We are in that intersection. Hint number 6, the last one. We live with conscience, with a sense of moral rightness, with a sense of duty. Something urges us to do that which is right. Something shames us when we are wrong, even when no one else knows, but we do. I do not believe in a God of reward and punishment, but somehow the logic of the universe compels us to develop a conscience and to know, for the most part, when we are doing right and when we are doing wrong. Immanuel Kant, who only rarely had a way with words, offered what is, for me, the most precise summary of religious sensibility when he wrote, "Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing wonder and awe: the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me." These two items, the starry heavens above and the moral law within, are the two components of any complete religion. And so, these are the hints and guesses about God that come from my experiences. I confess they don't say much about God, certainly nothing reliable nor certain, but I find them to be interesting, and I find them to be useful. As I said, I do not believe in the existence of God, but I do believe in God. The theist in me believes in God the same way the idealist in me believes in truth. I do not believe that something exists that we can call truth. Truth does not have its own separate existence. It permeates all of life. Truth can be experienced, though never fully understood. I do believe that there is a truthful quality to experience that excites us and edifies us. I suppose I believe in God in the same way I believe in truth. Truths, like God, are revealed to us only in part. There is always more truth to explore, more truth to experience. The theist in me is the sort that was described by John Haynes Holmes, a great Unitarian minister of the first half of the 20th century. When I say the word God, it is poetry and not theology. Nothing that any theologian ever wrote about God has helped me much, but everything the poets have written about flowers and birds and skies and seas, the saviors of the human race, and God, whoever that may be, has at one time or another reached my soul. More and more as I grow older, I live in the loving and lovely thoughts of these seers and prophets, these poets. The theologians gather dust upon the shelves of my library, but the poets are stained with my fingers and blotted with my tears. I never seem so near truth as when I care not what I think or believe, but only that these matters of inner vision would live forever. Poets rarely offer literal description. Great poets deliver to us only hints and guesses about truths. This is indeed a path to the divine. The subject of God rarely comes up in our Unitarian Universalist churches, including this one, because God, as that idea is commonly understood, is more confusing than enlightening. And yet God, as I understand the idea, so permeates every part of existence, in fact, is existence, that whenever life's meaning is discussed, God, whether specified or not, is also in there in the discussion. So once in a while, I do talk directly about God, as I have done today. But most of the time, I talk about other things, and any link to God is indirect or implied. To talk about God directly is usually to utter the unutterable, and so I can only do it by way of hints and guesses. And so with this, I end the second of 3 sermons by Reverend Bruce Clear. He did have a closing poem, which I'm going to hold for the closing words for our benediction. So our next, we go on to our slide, our hymn, which I cannot get this to move. There we go. And it jumped in me all the way to the front of the script. So we'll just go ahead. I know it will be projected. So Kate, if you want to just, we are.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, makers of nations, we're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
Uh-oh, while we were singing, this went off. What did you do, Nick? Okay, thank you. And so I want to end with the words from T.S. Eliot's poem, The Dry Savages. And that intersection between the timeless and time. For most of us, there is only the unattended moment, the moment in and out of time. The distraction of it, lost in a shaft of sunlight or music heard so deeply that it is not heard at all. But you are the music while the music lasts. There are only hints and guesses. Blessed be, amen, and namaste.
Thank you, Tinka, for sharing your valuable time and reading the sermon with us this morning. It is sincerely appreciated, and we look forward to seeing you again. I know all I can say is, wow, that was powerful, and the delivery was outstanding. For those of you who would like to stay in the sanctuary for 10 to 15 minutes to share some discussion, observations from the service, please remain in the sanctuary or online. Please be aware that these comments will be posted online. For the rest of you, you are now released from your seat. Welcome to adjourn to the parish hall. Is there anyone that would like to make a comment?
I would like to hear, or anything, if there was anything that touched you, that you related to. I would like to hear if there was anything that touched you or that you could relate to, or if it was completely, antithetical to your sense of the religion or of religiousness or whatever.
Did you want to make a comment? Give us your name, please.
My name's Travis. And I started crying at one point because I just felt like I don't remember the exact words of the sermon, but I just had a I was like listening, and then he said something that I was just like, oh, if that guy had just, I mean, he said something like that made me think of somebody just like, I don't want to sound too judgmental. It's just like with the example of the parting of the Red Sea, he said that it was just a special effect. And that word effect brought to my mind a scientific phenomenon called the observer effect, which humans can put themselves in the middle of.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went on to talk about particles and electrons. And I'm like, that's exactly what the Hebrews were talking about, was like the observer effect in relation to things like electrons right in front of you. So I was just listening to the sermon thinking like, I wonder if this person has like gone deep enough into like doing magic. Like I didn't hear the word magic at all in the sermon.
No.
So.
And I think I know what you're talking about. And I think that was one of the writers from the 1800s that he was quoting. It wasn't his, it wasn't the minister's words. It was something that he was quoting from another person. Yes.
Same.
Did the concept, how did the concept of this connectiveness between us and all things, including the atoms, how did that affect you? Is that something that
I think you're not supposed to have a conversation. You're supposed to let people speak.
I felt when he brought up the term science, I think it sounds unscientific to me to talk about God in the way that was talked about if you're going to invoke science in the same sermon. Because I think, that the distinction, there was a big distinction drawn between supernatural and natural. And that seems unscientific to me. I don't see anything wrong with saying that the Big Bang happened, which means that there was nothing, and then there was, let's say, a photon, an electron. And let's say that that photon still exists and it reacts with us.
Mm-hmm.
And it grew, maybe. It was a big photon. It can become another photon. It can stop existing and exist somewhere else. It could be all the electrons at once. And our minds are part of this thing. So when there was a distinction drawn between supernatural and natural, I'm just like, well, light exists still. And say there were these humans that were around experiencing weird phenomenon to them, and they called these phenomenon God. And I'm like, we're just like older versions of like the first consciousness. Daniel Dennett's book Consciousness Explained really blew my mind, because you can literally like look at conscious patterns in the book. It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you for coming up and sharing with us.
You have one on Zoom?
Linda?
Hi. I really like the sermon, Tinka. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I am a student of Course in Miracles. So I found the definition of miracles interesting too. But in the book, there is quite a lot of reference to God. And yet, in my studies, I have to say that I too can find myself very much relating to this particular sermon and my viewpoint of God through the Course of Miracles. And I've always found that unusual because basically there are a lot of Christian references to it. At the same time, I could get the same concept of God out of that book. So I really, really enjoyed hearing it defined in a different kind of way, but still being able to totally relate what the gentleman had to say. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And we have a question, which I can tell you I cannot answer, but I will read it. The question says, if we move towards a mythopoeic vision of the divine rather than a theological one, what troubles in our society might be ameliorated? I guess I would say my own personal. Oh, you want to answer that question? Well, I was just going to say that it seems to me that because with poetry, it's open to interpretation. And so I probably think that we wouldn't have the intense fighting or domination of one having to prove that their, interpretation is greater than another one. That's probably what I would come from.
I think, can you repeat the question again?
Sure. If we,
that was a question just for you, huh? And then I raised my hand.
I don't think it's just for me. It says, hi, Tinka, thank you. That was very inspiring. Question, if we move towards a mythopoetic vision of the divine rather than a theological one, what troubles in our society might be ameliorated?
Okay, so how I understand that would, when I hear mythopoetic, I hear like applying. What?
No.
I think of like application to our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
Okay, Bill,
like
wait just a second, Bill.
whereas like theological would be like kind of like divorced from reality math.
I don't know.
That's how I heard
If
the
that's
question
if that's
anyways.
your interpretation.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I heard it anyways. And I think the this is my soapbox
Mhm.
right here. The heaviest myth I think that exists is Genesis chapter, the first book, the first 3 chapters of the Torah.
Mhm.
And the first commandment given is thou shalt eat only plants. And so that would have a huge effect on society. Climate change being the number one problem that we have on a planet. Well, livestock production is the number one cause of climate change, because one of the reasons is it's 90% of forest destruction. Causes 90% of forest destruction. So there's a very from the theological into the stop pretending that your beliefs have no effect on reality. Like your beliefs actually can affect reality. You can stop pretending that they don't.
Thank you. Bill?
Well, I think if you go towards the mythic poetic, you probably end up with a superhero comic book.
It may have a symbol like that on your scarf.
MP man.
Be representative.
I got no problem with that at all. As far as the mythopoetic look, I'd say with it is, if you have a theologic view, you have a thing should be like this, or it happened thus and we forgot. Mythopoetic, on the other hand, is, for example, if you go into Greek mythology, you have the Antaeus story, which is, if you know of it, it's Hercules dealing with one of the sons of Earth. They're fighting up there. It's a conflict story. Hercules, being the big brute that he is, gets up, works the body slam. Whack! The giant, he at first he thought he was a big dude. Then he just sort of gets up and goes, "You're 6'9" and you were 6'3" when I body slammed you. Bludgeon. Okay, I'm going to do it again. Picked him up, body slammed. This time Antaeus arises with roots and pieces of earth coming from him, and it looks comfortable wearing it. He's about 7'9", and he's like, this is obviously not the way to go. And so in one way, theology says it happened thus. When you have a mythos or a poem, you are involved in the mix. There's a feeling to it. There's an attachment to it. You are in the, you spoke of the shimmer of forces, so that are anything from the wood of the pulpit in your hand, the who you've been married to for those many beautiful years, all of this beautiful stuff. And in this poetry, in this past, this present, the future I hope to have, it's all there. And in that mythopoetic thing, the word of God now is not just a noun like a brick. Now, all of a sudden, it's a dance, it's a fuel, it's a thunder, it's the paper underneath the poem, it's also the mind that wrote the poem, and it's the ears of the listeners who shall hear it. That's when you look at something like that, then you've got a bigger, more beautiful picture of what life can, is, and should be. When at that sad period when right after the election, where a lot of our more conservative brethren decided to just go immediately after every law that they could think of that upraised other people. They did it due to fear. Their part of the dance had gotten ugly and clouded. They thought, well, if we'd kept the lines clear and kept ourselves in power, we wouldn't be afraid of losing our portion of the dance. Whereas folks like us who are not that afraid of losing that portion, it's like, hey, come on over, bring your music, bring your cooking, you know, every shade of melanin that you're wearing, every hair clip that you got on your head, all welcome, let's dance. The dance upraises you. The dance hooks you together. The dance is when we find it in this spot here and now. This is what carries us through the rest of the week. The idea of a static thing moving bricks around. That would be more the theological, and that would be maybe more stable but less uplifting. And that's what I got from this. And I think that a couple of times he really wanted to see the miracle behind. He wanted to see simpler miracles, like in the miracle of the loaves and fishes. The miracle can be that God decided to transmute air molecules to pollen. Everyone gets a fish sandwich. Yay. Nice miracle, but 2 or 3 removes from any miracle, people are just sitting here going, I don't know if it's true or not. But when people's hearts are opened up to the point where they're sharing their sandwiches with their more loopy, less practical neighbors, now you got lasting. Now the dance has got more fuel.
Yes.
And in the long run, maybe it's, I like the flashier miracle, but I'm sure the other might be better. You know,
Like the stone soup.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, so Maggie. Yeah, pull it down for you.
This is in response to your original question about what
Step closer to
particularly
the mic, please.
spoke to us. That's the question. I'm not going to go
Sure.
into the other one. Okay. There were many parts that did, but I especially was moved by the quote from Harold Kirshner about miracles. Miracles is when we see people transforming their lives. And I know that's what moves me the most. And I never heard it expressed that way, but I really love that. So I just want to share that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Evelyn.
Hello. Yeah, I think it's interesting. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend the other day. And I'm a Buddhist, and my friend is, I guess, still figuring out their spiritual beliefs. And there's a concept in Buddhism of Brahman, and Brahman is basically what you were talking about. It's this idea of everything in the universe being interconnected, almost like God. I think the difference in Buddhism is that it's a completely unimportant idea. If you ever came to any Buddhist sermon, they would never ever talk about Brahman. I just think it's interesting how different religious views see the concept of God. Here in the West, it's like you can't even conceptualize religion without God. And then in Buddhism, God is there. It's not like an atheistic concept, but it's like not, we never talk about it ever. And then to my friend, they believed in, they actually kind of hated this idea of pantheism, that all of the world's religions could be understood as, oh, we're all worshiping the same thing, just in different ways. They really liked the idea that every religion was just worshiping something completely different that had nothing to do with anything else. And that if somebody wants to worship like a forest spirit, that forest spirit doesn't have to be, in their minds, connected to some greater thing we all believe in. They can just believe in this individual forest spirit. I thought it was interesting because we were having a conversation from my point of view, right? In Buddhism, where we understand the idea of gods as being avatars of one greater thing, images of one greater thing. Whereas in their point of view, those gods could be in people's minds literally real and distinct from the other things people believe in. Anyways, I don't know how on earth this adds to this discussion at all. It just reminded me of that conversation.
Thank you, Evelyn. Yes, would you like to come forward?
Hi, my name's Anita. I just want to say that I was thankful to hear the acknowledgement of it being the unknown. And instead of someone saying, this is what you have to believe, it's so nice to hear that. And in my studies, what I've always tried to strive for is the truth, but who knows what the truth is. But anyway, in one of the studies I've done, they use the mathematical symbol, the X, which I think is wonderful because it's it doesn't put a name to it. I mean, it's still a word, but it doesn't put a name to it, and you can strive for the answer. The X is looking for the answer. So I just really appreciate hearing that about, you know, not saying you have to believe this.
Thank you. Okay, and they're waiting for us and the food is out there ready. So I want to thank everybody who shared their opinion or their experiences or the effects of this. And next month we will do one on the Christian in me. So I hope you'll come and show up for that.